She was the last one standing, the reject, the one nobody wanted. While other women stepped forward into new lives, Eliza Kane remained frozen on that depot platform, drowning in whispers and cruel laughter, broken, useless, worthless. The words cut deeper than any blade, but when a stranger's hand reached through the crowd, calloused, certain, unflinching, everything changed. This is the story of a woman who had nothing left to lose and a man who saw what no one else could. A story of survival, storms, and second chances. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The Texas sun didn't care who you were. It beat down on everyone the same, the worthy and the worthless alike. Eliza Kane had learned that truth the hard way. She stood at the edge of the depot platform, her worn cotton dress clinging to her back, sweat trickling down her spine despite the shade from the station's overhang. Around her, the air buzzed with excitement, nervous laughter, and the rustle of hastily pressed skirts. 11 other women lined up like merchandise, each one trying to look composed while their futures hung in the balance. Eliza didn't bother trying anymore. She'd stopped caring about first impressions somewhere around Kansas City when she'd overheard two of the other women whispering about her limp, the way her left leg dragged just slightly when she walked, the result of a childhood fever that had nearly killed her. Her aunt had called it God's mercy that she'd survived it all. The boys back in Philadelphia had called it something else entirely. Ladies, please maintain your positions. The station manager, a pudgy man named Garrett with sweat stains spreading under his arms, waved his hands like he was conducting an orchestra. The gentlemen will be arriving shortly to make their selections. Selections. Like cattle. Like furniture. Eliza shifted her weight, trying to ease the ache that always started in her hip after standing too long. The woman next to her, Margaret, blonde and dimpled and everything Eliza wasn't, stepped slightly away, as if whatever made Eliza defective might be contagious. "I heard there's a doctor coming," Margaret whispered to the redhead on her other side, loud enough for Eliza to hear. "A real doctor, from back east. I'm hoping he picks me." "You and half the women here," the redhead replied. "I'm just hoping for someone with teeth." They giggled. Eliza stared straight ahead. The town of Ashford, Texas wasn't much to look at. A single main street lined with weather-beaten buildings, a general store, a saloon, a church that looked newer than everything else, and not much more. Dust devils swirled in the spaces between structures, and the horizon stretched flat and endless in every direction. It looked like the kind of place where dreams came to die. Fitting, Eliza thought. "Here they come," someone called. The women straightened immediately. Hands, smooth skirts, tucked stray hairs, pinched cheeks for color. Eliza did none of these things. She'd learned not to waste the effort. The men approached in a loose group, some on horseback, others on foot, all of them eyeing the line of women with expressions ranging from eager to skeptical. They were rough-looking, most of them, weathered by sun and wind, wearing clothes that had seen better days. Working men. Men who needed wives the way they needed good horses or reliable tools. Eliza recognized the look in their eyes. She'd seen it at the orphanage when families came to choose children. They wanted something useful, something that wouldn't break. The first man stepped forward, tall and broad-shouldered with a thick beard. He walked down the line slowly, studying each woman like he was considering a purchase. When he reached Eliza, his gaze lingered for a moment on her face. She wasn't ugly, she knew that much, but then it dropped to her stance, the way she held her weight differently on each leg. He moved on. "You." He stopped in front of a brunette 3 women down. "What's your name?" "Sarah, sir. Sarah Mitchell." "You know how to cook, clean, handle ranch work?" "Yes, sir, I can do all that." "Good." He nodded once. "You'll do. Get your things." Just like that, Sarah was chosen. She grabbed her single carpet bag with trembling hands and followed her new husband toward a wagon, not looking back at the women she was leaving behind. 1 down, 11 to go. The next man was older, maybe 50, with kind eyes and silver threading through his hair. A farmer, by the look of his hands. He chose Margaret, who practically glowed with relief as she curtsied and thanked him 3 times before gathering her belongings. Then came a younger man, nervous and stammering, who picked the redhead. A shopkeeper who chose a quiet woman with mousy brown hair. A rancher who selected a tall, sturdy-looking girl who admitted she'd grown up on a farm. One by one, they were claimed. Eliza watched the line shrink, watched the platform empty, felt the stares of the remaining men growing more pointed, more evaluating. "What about that one?" someone asked, gesturing toward Eliza. "The dark-haired girl." The man beside him shook his head. "She's lame. Look at how she stands." "Shame. Pretty face, though." "Pretty don't feed cattle or birth babies. Need a woman who can work." They said it right in front of her, like she wasn't even there. Eliza's jaw tightened, but she kept her expression blank. She'd had years of practice at this. Years of being overlooked, dismissed, found wanting. If she let every slight cut her, she'd have bled out long ago. By the time the sun reached its peak, only 3 women remained. Then 2. Then just Eliza. She stood alone on the platform while the last of the chosen women departed with their new husbands, and the remaining men, 5 of them, shifted uncomfortably, looking anywhere but at her. Garrett cleared his throat. "Well, gentlemen, there's still one more. No offense to the lady," one of the men interrupted. "But I need a wife who can pull her weight. Can't have someone who'll slow things down." "I can work," Eliza said quietly. It was the first time she'd spoken since arriving in Ashford. "I can cook, clean, mend, tend gardens. I'm not helpless." The man looked uncomfortable. "I'm sure you're very capable, miss, but you want someone whole," Eliza finished for him. "Someone who won't embarrass you." "Now that's not—" "It's fine." Eliza cut him off, her voice flat. "I understand." The men exchanged glances, then one by one, they walked away. Back to their wagons, their horses, their lives that didn't include her. Garrett approached, wringing his hands. "Miss Kane, I'm terribly sorry about this. Perhaps if we sent word back east, arranged for the next group—" "Don't bother." Eliza picked up her small trunk. Everything she owned in the world fit inside it. "I'll figure something out." "But where will you go? You can't just—" "I said I'll figure it out." She started toward the steps, her limp more pronounced now that exhaustion was setting in. Behind her, she could hear people gathering, watching, the rejected bride, the leftover, something to gossip about over supper. "Well, would you look at that?" A woman's voice carried across the platform. Even the desperate ones didn't want her. Laughter rippled through the small crowd. Eliza's fingers tightened on her trunk handle, but she kept walking, one foot in front of the other, the same way she'd gotten through everything else in her life. "Shame to come all this way for nothing," another voice added. "What kind of woman can't even get picked when there's more men than choices?" "The broken kind?" someone else replied. More laughter. Eliza reached the steps. The sun glared off the dusty street below. She had maybe $12 to her name, no place to go, and no prospects for changing either of those facts. The logical part of her brain was already calculating how long until her money ran out, what her options were, whether she could find work in a town this small when she couldn't even find a husband. The emotional part of her brain had gone numb somewhere around the 4th rejection. She was halfway down the steps when a voice cut through the crowd noise. "Hold on." Eliza stopped. She wasn't sure why. The words hadn't been directed at her, hadn't carried any particular urgency, but something in the tone made her pause. The crowd went quiet. Footsteps approached from behind, slow and measured. Boots on wood. Eliza didn't turn around, didn't dare hope. Hope was a luxury she'd given up on. The footsteps stopped beside her. "You still looking for a husband?" Eliza turned. The man standing next to her was tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the kind of lean, weathered build that came from years of hard labor. His face was tan dark, with lines around his eyes and mouth that suggested he was somewhere in his 30s. Dark hair, dark eyes, and an expression that gave away absolutely nothing. He wasn't looking at her face. He was looking at her eyes, steady and direct, like he was trying to see something beyond the surface. Eliza's voice came out rough. She cleared her throat. "Yes." "You scared of hard work?" "No." "You need someone to coddle you, make pretty promises?" "No." "You honest?" The question caught her off guard. "Yes." He studied her for another moment, then nodded once. "Good enough. Name's Caleb Ward. I've got a ranch about 20 miles north of here. I need a wife." Eliza stared at him. "You don't even know me." "Know enough. You're still standing, aren't you? After all that." He gestured vaguely toward the platform, where people were starting to whisper again. "That tells me what I need to know." "I'm lame. bluntly, in case you didn't notice. I noticed. You think I care if you walk with a limp? I need someone who won't quit on me, not someone who can run foot races. Why? The question burst out before Eliza could stop it. Why would you choose me when everyone else? Because everyone else is a fool, Caleb interrupted. His voice was rough, matter of fact. And I don't have time to waste on fools or their opinions. Now you want to come with me or not? I'm not going to stand here arguing about it. Eliza looked at him, this stranger who'd appeared out of nowhere with an offer that made no sense. She looked back at the crowd on the platform, at Garrett's pitying expression, at the women whispering behind their hands. She thought about Philadelphia, about the aunt who'd raised her with constant reminders of what a burden she was, about the men who'd courted her sisters while barely glancing in her direction, about every door that had closed in her face because she wasn't quite good enough, quite whole enough, quite worth the effort. She looked at Caleb Ward again, at his weathered face and unreadable eyes, and made a choice. All right, she said, I'll come. Something flickered in his expression. Not quite satisfaction, not quite relief. Just acknowledgement. Get your things. Eliza picked up her trunk. Caleb took it from her without asking, tucking it under one arm like it weighed nothing, and started toward a wagon hitched at the end of the street. Eliza followed, aware of every eye on her, every whispered word. Did you see that? Caleb Ward? I thought he'd sworn off women after what happened. She must be desperate, going off with him. Eliza blocked it out. She'd gotten good at that, too. The wagon was simple but well-maintained, pulled by two sturdy horses. Caleb loaded her trunk in the back, then turned to help her up onto the seat. His hand was calloused and warm, his grip firm but not tight. You can still change your mind, he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Once we leave, it's a long ride back. Eliza met his eyes. I'm not changing my mind. He nodded, released her hand, and walked around to the driver's side. A moment later, they were moving, the wagon creaking as it rolled down the main street of Ashford. Eliza didn't look back. They rode in silence for the first hour. The town disappeared behind them, swallowed by the vast emptiness of the prairie. Nothing but grass and sky in every direction, broken occasionally by a stand of scrub trees or a distant rock formation. Eliza had never seen so much space in her life. Philadelphia had been all crowded streets and narrow alleys, buildings pressed up against each other like people trying to stay warm. This was different. This was exposure. Nowhere to hide. You from back east? Caleb asked eventually, breaking the silence. Philadelphia. Long way from home. It wasn't home, Eliza said. Not really. He glanced at her, then back at the road. Family? Dead. Except for an aunt who was happy to see me go. That why you came out here? Mail order bride? That, and I didn't have anywhere else to go. Eliza saw no point in lying about it. The agency made it sound better than it was. They always do. Caleb's voice was dry. You know what you're getting into? Ranch life isn't easy. I know hard work. I'm not afraid of it. Good. Because I wasn't lying when I said I need someone who won't quit. My last... He stopped abruptly, jaw tightening. I had help before. Don't anymore. Can't run the place alone, and I can't afford to hire hands. Eliza waited, but he didn't continue. The last what? Last wife? Last ranch hand? The people in town had started to say something about him, but they'd cut themselves off when he'd appeared. What happened? She asked. That's my business. The words were harsh, but his tone wasn't angry, just final. A door closing. Eliza understood that too. All right, she said. What do you need me to do? At the ranch? Caleb's shoulders relaxed slightly, like he'd been braced for an argument. Cook, clean, help with the animals when needed. Chickens, mostly. Maybe the milk cow. Mending, washing, basic stuff. Garden, if you know how. I can do all that. Place is rough, he warned. Not fancy. 2 rooms, needs work. I haven't had time to keep up with everything. I'm not expecting fancy. He nodded, seeming satisfied with that. They fell back into silence, but it felt less heavy now. More like they were 2 people who'd made a practical agreement and were comfortable leaving it at that. The sun was starting to sink toward the horizon when smoke appeared in the distance. Eliza saw it first, a dark column rising against the orange sky. She sat up straighter, pointing. Is that? Hell! Caleb snapped the reins, urging the horses faster. That's coming from my property. The wagon jolted over the rough ground as they picked up speed. Eliza gripped the seat, her heart suddenly pounding. Fire on the prairie. She'd heard stories about that. How fast it could spread. How it could destroy everything in its path. As they got closer, she could see the flames. Not huge, not yet, but bright against the darkening sky. They were consuming what looked like a storage shed near a small house. Caleb pulled up hard, jumping down before the wagon had fully stopped. Stay here. But Eliza was already climbing down, ignoring the sharp protest from her hip as she landed harder than she should have. She could see Caleb running toward the flames, and she ran after him, her limp making her gait uneven, but not stopping her. I told you to stay. Where's your water? Eliza cut him off. Caleb stared at her for a split second, then pointed toward a well. There, buckets in the house. Eliza ran, or her version of it, toward the small structure. The door wasn't locked. She shoved it open and found herself in a single room that served as kitchen, living space, and everything else. It was sparse, almost bare, but clean. She spotted 2 buckets near a dry sink and grabbed them. Outside, Caleb was already hauling water from the well, throwing it on the flames. The shed was beyond saving, but the fire was spreading toward the house, toward the grass, toward everything. Eliza filled her buckets and stumbled toward the flames. The heat hit her like a wall, making her eyes water. She threw the water where Caleb pointed, then ran back for more. Again, and again, and again. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed in protest. Sweat poured down her face, mixing with ash and smoke. She lost track of how many trips she made, how many buckets she hauled. All that mattered was the water, the flames, the desperate need to stop this before everything burned. At some point, the fire began to lose. The flames shrank, sputtered, died back to smoking embers. Eliza stood there, gasping for air, her dress soaked and filthy, her hands blistered from the bucket handles. Caleb was bent over, hands on his knees, breathing hard. The shed was gone, just a skeleton of blackened wood and ash. But the house was safe. The grass had been stopped. What happened? Eliza managed to ask. Don't know. Caleb straightened, wiping soot from his face. Lightning, maybe. Or someone got careless with a cigarette. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time since they'd started fighting the fire. You all right? Eliza glanced down at herself. Her dress was ruined. Her hands were raw. Her leg was throbbing so badly she wasn't sure she could walk. But she was still standing. I'm fine, she said. Caleb's mouth twitched, almost like he wanted to smile but had forgotten how. You're either tough or crazy. Haven't figured out which yet. Both, probably. This time he did smile, just barely. Come on, let's get you inside before you collapse. He didn't offer to help her walk, which Eliza appreciated. She made it to the house on her own, even if she had to grip the doorframe for a moment once she got there. The interior looked even more sparse in the lamplight Caleb lit. One room, like she'd seen. A bed in one corner, a table with 2 chairs, a fireplace with a cooking pot, some shelves with basic supplies. A door in the back wall that probably led to the second room he'd mentioned. Not much to look at, Caleb said, following her gaze. It's fine. He moved around her, pulling out one of the chairs. Sit. I'll get something for those hands. Eliza sat before her leg gave out. Caleb rummaged in a cabinet and came back with a tin of something that smelled medicinal and clean rags. Give me your hands. She held them out. He took them carefully, his touch surprisingly gentle as he examined the blisters. Without saying anything, he began cleaning and treating them, working with the practiced efficiency of someone who dealt with plenty of injuries. You did good out there, he said after a while. A lot of women would have stayed in the wagon like I told them to. I don't follow orders well. I'm starting to see that. He finished with one hand, started on the other. That going to be a problem? Depends on the order. Fair enough. He tied off the bandage, then sat back. Ground rules. I don't expect you to be anyone you're not. Don't expect me to be anyone I'm not either. We're both here because we need something. You need a place, I need help. That's the deal. I won't lie to you, won't make promises I can't keep, and I expect the same from you. Eliza met his eyes. What about... She stopped, not sure how to phrase it. What about what? The marriage part. She gestured vaguely, feeling heat rise to her face that had nothing to do with the fire they'd just fought. Understanding crossed Caleb's features. Have the back room. Door locks from the inside. What happens between us, if anything, happens when we both want it to. Not before. Clear? Relief flooded through Eliza so suddenly she almost sagged in her chair. Clear. Good. Caleb stood, moving toward the shelves. You hungry? I've got some beans, some bread that's only a little stale. I can cook, Eliza said, starting to stand. You can rest, Caleb corrected. You just hauled water for an hour straight. I can heat beans. Eliza wanted to argue, but her body was screaming at her to stay sitting. She watched as Caleb worked, economical movements, no wasted effort. He built up the fire, set the pot to heat, sliced bread with a knife that looked sharp enough to shave with. How long have you been out here? She asked. 5 years. Built most of this place myself. By yourself? Had help for a while. That door-closing tone again. Eliza decided not to push. Instead, she looked around the room more carefully. No decorations, no personal touches, nothing that spoke of comfort or permanence. It looked like a place someone was surviving in, not living in. The beans were better than she expected, though that might have just been hunger talking. They ate in silence, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the occasional settling of the house. I'll show you the back room, Caleb said when they'd finished. It's not much, but it's yours. He led her through the door she'd noticed earlier. The room was small, barely big enough for the narrow bed and trunk that were its only furniture. But it had a window, and the bed looked clean, and there was a hook on the door for the lock he'd mentioned. I'll bring your trunk in tomorrow, Caleb said from the doorway. Too dark to mess with it now. Thank you. He nodded, already turning away. Get some rest. Morning comes early. Eliza watched him go, heard him moving around in the front room, then the sound of him settling into what must be his own bed. She closed the door, tested the lock. It worked, and sank onto the mattress. She should have been thinking about what she'd done, about the choice she'd made to go off with a stranger to the middle of nowhere, about the fire, the work ahead, the uncertainty of everything. Instead, she thought about how, for the first time in longer than she could remember, someone had chosen her. Not because she was pretty or pleasant or perfect, but because she was still standing. She fell asleep still wearing her ruined dress, too exhausted to care. Eliza woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and pale light filtering through the window. For a moment she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came back. The depot, Caleb, the fire, this small room that was now hers. She sat up, immediately regretting it when every muscle in her body protested. Her hands were stiff under the bandages, her leg was worse than usual, and she was pretty sure she'd inhaled enough smoke yesterday to line her lungs with ash. But she was here, and that meant there was work to do. Eliza changed into her one other dress, slightly less ruined than the one she'd fought the fire in, and opened her door. The front room was empty. The front door stood open, morning light spilling across the rough wooden floor. Through it, Eliza could see Caleb outside, already working on clearing the remains of the burned shed. She should help. That's what she was here for. But first, breakfast. The kitchen area was basic, but she could work with that. She found flour, salt, a bit of lard, enough to make biscuits. The fire was still going from last night, just banked low. She built it back up, found a pan, and got to work. Her hands hurt, but she pushed through it. She'd worked through worse. By the time Caleb came back inside, drawn by the smell, she had biscuits ready and coffee brewing in a battered pot she'd found. He stopped in the doorway, staring at the food like he wasn't sure it was real. You didn't have to... I know, Eliza interrupted. But I did. Sit. He sat. She put food in front of him and poured coffee. They ate without talking, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Just two people fueling up for the day ahead. What needs doing? Eliza asked when they'd finished. Caleb looked at her over his coffee cup. You sure you're up for it? You took a beating yesterday. I'm fine. You're limping worse than yesterday. I'm always going to limp, Eliza said flatly. Might as well get used to it. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe. All right, chickens need feeding and watering, eggs need collecting, cow needs milking. Then there's laundry, mending, and about 100 other things that have been piling up. Show me where everything is. He did. The ranch was small. The house, the burned shed, a chicken coop, a small barn with the cow and 2 horses, a vegetable garden that had seen better days. Everything was functional, but barely, held together with hard work and determination. "I'll handle the heavy work," Caleb said, "clearing the shed, checking fences, that kind of thing. You do what you can with the rest." Eliza nodded and got to work. The chickens were easier than she'd expected, bossy and opinionated, but manageable. The cow was trickier. Eliza had never milked anything in her life, and it took her 3 tries and a lot of patient huffing from the cow before she got the hang of it. By noon, she'd collected eggs, milked the cow, hauled water for the animals, started a batch of laundry in a tub behind the house, and assessed the state of the garden. Her hands were screaming under the bandages, her dress was soaked with sweat, and her leg felt like someone was driving nails into it. She kept going. Caleb appeared around midday with a rabbit he'd snared. "Thought we could use some meat." "I'll cook it," Eliza said, taking it from him. She'd never prepared a rabbit before either, but how hard could it be? Pretty hard, as it turned out. But she figured it out, cleaning and cutting the meat while Caleb worked on reinforcing the chicken coop. By evening, she had a stew going that actually smelled edible. They ate together again, still mostly silent. Caleb seemed like the kind of man who didn't waste words, and Eliza was too tired to make conversation anyway. "You did good today," he said as they cleaned up. "I'm still learning." "That's more than most would do." He dried the last dish, set it aside. "I know this isn't what you signed up for. Most women coming out here, they're expecting more. I told you, I don't need pretty promises." "No, you don't." He looked at her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "But you should know. This life, it's hard. Gets lonely. Gets dangerous sometimes. If you're going to leave, better to do it now before..." "Before what?" "Before it gets complicated." Eliza thought about that, about the weeks and months stretching ahead, about learning to live with this quiet stranger in the middle of nowhere, about all the ways it could go wrong. "I'm not leaving," she said. "Why not?" "You don't know me. Don't owe me anything." "Because for the first time in my life, someone chose me for who I am, not in spite of it." Eliza met his gaze steadily. "That means something." Caleb held her eyes for a long moment, then nodded. "All right then. Welcome to Ward Ranch, Mrs. Ward." Mrs. Ward, the name settled over her like a coat that didn't quite fit yet, but might, given time. That night Eliza lay in her narrow bed and listened to the sounds of the prairie, wind in the grass, distant animal calls, the creak of the house settling. So different from Philadelphia, from everything she'd known. She thought about the women who'd been chosen before her, wondered if they were lying in their new beds thinking the same thoughts, wondering if they'd made the right choice. Eliza didn't wonder. She'd been given a chance, and she was going to take it. Whatever came next, she'd face it the same way she'd faced everything else, still standing. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the smell of rain, and somewhere in the darkness, Eliza could have sworn she heard thunder. The rain came that night, hard and sudden, drumming against the roof like impatient fingers. Eliza lay awake listening to it, wondering if the roof would hold. It did, mostly, though she could hear dripping somewhere in the front room. By morning, the world had transformed. The parched prairie had drunk deep, and everything looked greener, softer. The air smelled clean. Caleb was already gone when Eliza emerged from her room. She found a note on the table, rough handwriting, economical words. "Checking fence lines. Back by noon." She set to work. The dripping she'd heard was coming from a leak near the fireplace. She positioned a bucket under it, made a mental note to mention it to Caleb. Then she started breakfast, fed the chickens, milked the cow, hauled water. The routine was becoming familiar, her body starting to remember the rhythm of it. Her hands were healing. The blisters had scabbed over, and she could work without the bandages now, though her palms were still tender. Her leg was another matter. The constant activity was making it worse, the ache settling deeper into her hip. But she'd lived with pain before. She'd live with it now. She was scrubbing clothes in the washtub when she heard horses approaching. Eliza straightened, wiping her hands on her apron. 2 riders were coming up the path, men, from the look of them. She glanced toward where Caleb had gone, but there was no sign of him. The men pulled up near the house. The first was older, maybe 60, with iron gray hair and a face like weathered leather. The second was younger, 30s perhaps, with pale eyes that lingered on Eliza in a way that made her skin crawl. "Help you?" Eliza called out, staying where she was. The older man dismounted. "Looking for Caleb Ward. He around?" "He's out checking fences. Should be back soon." And who are you? Wife. The words felt strange in her mouth, but she said them with conviction. The two men exchanged glances. Wife, huh? The older man spit tobacco juice into the dirt. Didn't know Caleb was looking for another one. Not after... After what? Eliza asked, even though she knew she shouldn't. The younger man grinned. After what happened to the last Mrs. Ward. A chill ran through Eliza that had nothing to do with the morning air. Before she could respond, Caleb's voice cut across the yard. That's enough, Porter. Eliza turned to see him riding up, his face hard as stone. He dismounted in one smooth motion, positioning himself between her and the two men. What do you want? Caleb's voice was flat, dangerous. The older man held up his hands. Easy, Ward. Just being neighborly. Heard you had someone new. Wanted to come see for ourselves. You've seen. Now get off my land. Now hold on. I said get off my land. The younger man, Porter, laughed. Still touchy about it, aren't you? Can't say I blame you. Finding your wife like that. Porter. The older man's voice was sharp. That's enough. We're leaving. He looked at Caleb. Just remember, Ward, offer still stands. You want to sell this place? I'll give you a fair price. I'm not selling. You sure about that? Running a ranch alone, that's hard enough. With a crippled wife. Caleb took a step forward. One more word about my wife, and you'll be picking up your teeth. The older man studied Caleb for a moment, then shrugged. Suit yourself. Come on, Porter. They mounted up and rode off. Eliza watched them go, her heart pounding. Who were they? She asked when they disappeared from view. Neighbors. The old man's name is Curtis Hammond, owns the spread east of here, twice the size of this place, 3 times the cattle. Been trying to buy me out for 2 years. And the other one? His son, Porter. Caleb's jaw was tight. Stay away from him. If he shows up when I'm not here, lock yourself inside. What did he mean about the last Mrs. Ward? Caleb was quiet for so long Eliza thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, her name was Rebecca. We were married 3 years. She died 2 winters ago. How? Fever. Started out like nothing, just a cold. Then it got worse. By the time I got the doctor out here, it was too late. His voice was completely flat, empty of emotion. She died 3 days later. Eliza absorbed this. A dead wife. That explained the bare house, the lack of personal touches, the way Caleb had locked parts of himself away. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Don't be. You didn't know her. He turned toward the barn. I've got work to do. Caleb? He stopped but didn't turn around. Thank you for what you said to them. About me. His shoulders tensed. I meant it. You're my wife. That means something out here, even if it doesn't back east. Nobody talks about you like that. Then he was gone, disappearing into the barn. Eliza stood there for a moment, processing. Then she went back to her washing, but her mind was elsewhere. A dead wife. Hostile neighbors. And something about the way Porter Hammond had looked at her, like she was prey. She was starting to understand what Caleb had meant about this life being dangerous. The next week passed in a blur of work. Eliza fell into the rhythm of ranch life, early mornings, long days, exhaustion that dragged her under as soon as her head hit the pillow. She learned to read the weather, to predict when rain was coming by the way the animals acted. She learned which chickens were broody and which were reliable layers. She learned that the cow, whose name was apparently Bessie, had a sweet tooth for apples and would follow Eliza around like a dog if she had one in her pocket. She learned that Caleb was a man of few words but consistent action. He fixed the leak in the roof without being asked. He brought in fresh meat every few days. Rabbit, prairie chicken, once a young deer. He never complained, never raised his voice, never made demands. But he also never opened up, never shared more than necessary. They existed together in a strange kind of parallel, sharing space, sharing meals, sharing work, but never quite connecting. Until the day the cattle got out. Eliza was in the garden, trying to salvage what she could from months of neglect, when she heard Caleb cursing. She looked up to see him running toward the northern fence line, where 6 cattle were streaming through a gap in the wire. She didn't think, she just ran. By the time she reached Caleb, he was already trying to drive the cattle back, but they were spooked and scattering. 6 head didn't sound like much, but they represented a significant portion of his small herd. What do you need? Eliza called out. Can you ride? No. Then get behind them, wave your arms, make noise. Try to push them back toward the fence. Eliza did as she was told, hobbling as fast as she could, waving her apron and shouting. The cattle eyed her with bovine suspicion, but started moving away from her, which was something. For the next hour, they worked together. Caleb on horseback, Eliza on foot, both of them driving the wayward cattle back toward the ranch. It was hot, dusty work. Eliza's leg was screaming at her, and she was pretty sure she'd torn her dress in 3 places, but she didn't stop. Finally, mercifully, the last cow was back inside the fence line. Caleb dismounted and immediately started repairing the gap, his movements quick and efficient despite obvious exhaustion. Eliza sagged against a fence post, breathing hard. Her vision was starting to blur at the edges, and she realized dimly that she might have pushed herself too far. "You all right?" She looked up to find Caleb watching her, concern creasing his features. "Fine," she managed. "You don't look fine. You look like you're about to fall over." The world tilted. Strong hands caught her before she hit the ground. "Damn it," Caleb muttered. "I shouldn't have let you." "I'm fine," Eliza insisted, even though she clearly wasn't. "Just need a minute." Caleb didn't argue. He just scooped her up like she weighed nothing and started carrying her back toward the house. "Put me down. I can walk." "Sure you can. Right after you pass out and crack your skull open." Eliza wanted to protest, but she was so tired, and being carried was actually kind of nice. She let her head rest against his shoulder, just for a moment. She must have dozed off, because the next thing she knew, she was lying on her bed and Caleb was pulling off her boots. "What are you doing?" "Getting you settled. You overdid it." "The cattle are fine. Fence is fixed. Everything's fine except you, and you'd be fine too if you'd just rest for 5 minutes. Eliza tried to sit up. Caleb put a hand on her shoulder, gentle but firm. "Rest. That's an order." "Thought you didn't give orders." "I make exceptions for stubborn women who don't know when to quit." Despite everything, Eliza almost smiled. "Takes one to know one." Caleb's expression softened just a fraction. "Yeah, I suppose it does." He straightened up. "Get some sleep. I'll handle dinner." "Caleb." "What?" "Thank you." He nodded and left, closing the door quietly behind him. Eliza lay there, staring at the ceiling. Something had shifted between them today. Not much, just a crack in the wall he'd built around himself. But it was something. She fell asleep thinking about the way he'd carried her, like she mattered, like she wasn't just hired help but actually his wife. When she woke, it was dark outside. She could smell food cooking, something simple, probably beans again. She got up, wincing at the stiffness in her leg, and made her way to the front room. Caleb was at the stove, stirring a pot. He glanced over when she entered. "You should still be resting." "I've rested enough." Eliza moved to the table, lowering herself carefully into a chair. "How bad was the fence?" "Bad enough. Someone cut the wire." Eliza's head snapped up. "Cut it? On purpose?" "Yeah." Caleb's voice was grim. "Clean cut, not a break. Someone wanted those cattle to get out. The Hammonds. Can't prove it, but yeah, probably." "Why would they do that?" Caleb brought over 2 bowls of stew, sat down across from her. "Because they want this land, and they figure if they make life hard enough for me, I'll give up and sell. They've been pulling this kind of thing since Rebecca died. Cut fences, spooked cattle, once they even poisoned my well, had to dig a new one." "That's..." Eliza struggled to find words. "That's criminal. That's business out here. Law's a long way away and Curtis Hammond has money. Money talks louder than right and wrong. So what do we do?" Caleb looked at her, really looked at her. "We?" "Yes, we. This is my home too now." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe gratitude. "We keep working. Keep fixing what they break. Keep going until they realize we're not quitting. And if they don't realize it, then things get worse." He took a bite of stew. "That's why I told you to stay away from Porter. He's the type who takes what he wants, and his father covers for him. Last year there was a family about 30 miles south, had a daughter, maybe 16, pretty girl. Porter took a shine to her." Eliza's stomach clenched. "What happened?" "She disappeared one night, turned up 3 days later, wouldn't talk about where she'd been. Family packed up and left within the week. No proof, but everyone knew." "And nobody did anything?" Like I said, money talks, and the way off. Caleb's jaw was tight. So you see why I want you to be careful. Lock the doors when I'm not here. If you see Hammond or his son coming, you get inside and you stay there. Eliza nodded slowly. The prairie had seemed empty, peaceful. Now she was seeing the ugliness underneath. They finished their meal in silence. Eliza washed the dishes while Caleb checked the doors, the windows, making sure everything was secure. It felt like preparing for a siege. Eliza? She turned. Caleb was standing by the door, backlit by lamplight, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain. Yeah? Today? When you helped with the cattle. You didn't have to do that. Most women wouldn't have. Most women aren't me. No, they're not. He paused, seeming to struggle with something. I know this isn't what you signed up for. I know it's harder than I made it sound, more dangerous. If you want to leave, if you want to go back east, I'll give you the money for passage. No hard feelings. Eliza set down the dish she was holding. Is that what you want? For me to leave? No. But what I want doesn't matter. You deserve to know what you're choosing. I know what I'm choosing. Eliza crossed the room until she was standing in front of him. I'm choosing this. The work, the danger, the struggle. All of it. Because it's mine. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing my own path. And it leads right here. Caleb held her gaze. In the lamplight, his eyes looked almost warm. You're sure? I'm sure. He nodded. Then, slowly, he reached out and touched her face, just a brief brush of his fingers against her cheek. Then I'm glad you're here. It was the most emotional thing he'd said to her since they'd met. Eliza felt something loosen in her chest, something she hadn't realized was wound tight. Me too, she whispered. The moment stretched between them, fragile and new. Then Caleb stepped back, clearing his throat. We should get some sleep. Morning comes early. It always does. That night, lying in her narrow bed, Eliza thought about choices and consequences, about the life she'd left behind and the one she was building. It wasn't easy, it wasn't safe, but it was hers, and that made all the difference. The harassment from the Hammonds continued over the next 2 weeks. Small things, mostly. A broken fence here, some missing tools there. Nothing they could prove, but the pattern was clear. Caleb grew more tense, more watchful. He started carrying his rifle with him everywhere, even just to check the animals. At night, Eliza would hear him moving around, checking locks, looking out windows. She started doing the same, staying alert, paying attention to sounds that didn't belong. Once she could have sworn she heard horses in the middle of the night, but by the time she got to the window, there was nothing there. It was wearing on both of them. Then came the day everything changed. Eliza was hanging laundry when she saw the dust cloud. Multiple riders, coming fast. Her heart kicked into overdrive. Caleb! He was out of the barn in seconds, rifle in hand. Get inside! There's too many of them. Inside! Now! Eliza ran for the house, but she didn't lock herself in. Instead, she grabbed the shotgun Caleb kept loaded by the door and positioned herself at the window where she could see. 6 riders pulled up in the yard. Curtis Hammond and his son, plus 4 men Eliza didn't recognize. Ranch hands, probably. Caleb stood in front of the house, rifle held loosely but ready. What do you want, Hammond? Curtis dismounted. We have a problem, Ward. That's so. Someone's been cutting my fences, letting my cattle wander. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Not my problem if you can't maintain your property. Porter laughed. That's rich coming from you. Your fences have been falling apart for months. Because you keep cutting them, Caleb said flatly. Prove it, Curtis challenged. Don't need to prove it. I know it. You know it. Now get off my land. I don't think so. Curtis's voice hardened. See, I'm tired of playing games with you, Ward. I made you a fair offer for this place. More than fair. Time to accept it. I'm not selling. Then you're a fool. A stubborn fool with a crippled wife and no future. How long do you think you can hold out? Another month? 2? Winter's coming. You think you can make it through another winter out here alone? I'm not alone anymore. Curtis's gaze flicked toward the house, toward where he probably knew Eliza was watching. That little thing? What's she going to do when the snow comes? When you run out of firewood and food? When the wolves start circling? More than you'd think, Caleb said. Porter urged his horse forward. Come on, old man. Let's just take what we want. Who's going to stop us? That's when Eliza stepped out onto the porch, shotgun leveled at Porter's chest. I am, she said clearly. Every head swiveled toward her. Caleb's expression flashed through several emotions: anger, fear, something that might have been pride. Get back inside, he said. No. Porter laughed, but it sounded forced. You even know how to use that thing, sweetheart? Eliza cocked the shotgun. The sound was very loud in the sudden silence. I grew up in Philadelphia. I know how to use it just fine. Question is, do you want to find out how well? The ranch hands exchanged glances. This wasn't what they'd signed up for. Curtis's face had gone red. Put that down before you hurt yourself. I'll put it down when you get off our land. Your land? You've been here, what, a few weeks? You think that makes this yours? I think the law says it's ours, and you're trespassing. Now leave, or I start shooting. She meant it. Eliza could feel the anger burning through her, all the rejection, all the humiliation, all the times she'd been pushed around and dismissed. It was all there, focused into this moment. Curtis could see it too. His eyes narrowed. You're making a mistake. Wouldn't be my first. Now get off our land. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Curtis jerked his head at his men. Let's go. This isn't over, Ward. Yeah, it is, Caleb said. Next time you set foot on my property uninvited, I won't bother talking first. The Hammonds and their men rode off. Eliza kept the shotgun up until they were out of sight, then lowered it with shaking hands. Caleb was beside her in an instant, taking the gun. What the hell were you thinking? I was thinking you needed help. I told you to stay inside, and I told you I don't follow orders well. Eliza's voice rose to match his. What was I supposed to do? Hide while they ran us off our own land? Yes, you were supposed to stay safe. Safe? There's no safe out here. You said so yourself. She was shaking now, adrenaline and fear and anger all mixing together. I'm not going to hide, Caleb. I'm not going to let them push us around just because you're what? Because I'm broken. The words burst out of her. Because I'm the crippled wife they think they can ignore. Well, I'm done being ignored. I'm done being dismissed. This is my home, and I'm going to fight for it. Caleb stared at her. Then, incredibly, he smiled. A real smile, not the ghost of one she'd seen before. You're not broken, he said. You're the strongest person I've ever met. Eliza's anger deflated as quickly as it had risen. I'm scared, she admitted. Me too. But we're scared together, and that counts for something. He reached out, took her hand. You did good out there. Stupid, but good. Stupid? You could have been shot. So could you. Yeah, but I'm used to it. Despite everything, Eliza laughed. It came out shaky but genuine. We're a mess, aren't we? The biggest mess I've ever seen. Caleb squeezed her hand. But we're our mess. Come on. Let's get inside before they decide to come back. They went inside together, and for the first time, Caleb didn't retreat to his own space. They sat at the table, drinking coffee that was probably too strong, letting the adrenaline fade. They'll try again, Caleb said finally. I know. Could get worse. A lot worse. I know that too. He looked at her across the table. Why are you really staying, Eliza? And don't give me that speech about choosing your own path. There's got to be more to it than that. Eliza thought about it. About all the reasons, good and bad. Finally, she settled on the truth. Because for the first time in my life, someone sees me. Not what's wrong with me, not what I can't do. You see who I actually am, and that's worth fighting for. Caleb was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Rebecca was beautiful, perfect, everyone said, and she was kind, gentle, everything a wife should be. But she couldn't survive out here. Not really. The loneliness ate at her, the hardship. By the end, she was just hollowed out. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm just saying you're nothing like her. You're tougher, meaner, when you need to be. And that's what this place needs. That's what I need. It was the most he'd ever told her about his first wife, about himself. Eliza felt the trust in it, the weight of what he was sharing. We're going to make it, she said. Whatever the Hammonds throw at us, we're going to make it. Yeah, Caleb agreed. We are. Outside, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. Eliza could see them through the window, dark and heavy with rain. She thought about storms to come, both metaphorical, about the battles ahead, the struggles they'd face. But for the first time since arriving in Texas, she wasn't afraid. She had a home, she had a partner, and she had something worth fighting for. The rest would come as it came. The storm clouds Eliza had seen gathered strength over the next 3 days. They hung on the horizon like a bruise, dark and swollen, but refusing to break. The air grew thick, heavy with moisture that never quite became rain. The animals were restless, chickens refusing to leave the coop, Bessie lowing anxiously whenever Eliza approached. "Storm's coming," Caleb said on the third morning, studying the sky with narrowed eyes. "Big one." "How can you tell?" "The way the wind's moving, the color of those clouds. And my shoulder, the one I broke falling off a horse 10 years ago. Aches like hell when a bad storm's coming." Eliza had noticed him favoring that side, but hadn't said anything. "What do we need to do?" "Secure everything. Bring in extra firewood, fill every container we have with water. Move the animals into the barn, all of them. Check the root cellar, make sure the door's solid." He paused. "Could be nothing, could blow over. But out here, you don't take chances." They spent the day preparing. Eliza hauled water until her arms shook, stacked firewood until her back screamed. Caleb reinforced the barn doors, checked the house for weak spots, moved anything that could become a projectile into the shed. By evening, the wind had picked up, carrying with it the smell of rain and something else. Something electric, charged. The sky had turned an ugly greenish gray. "That's not good," Caleb muttered, staring at the horizon. "What?" "That color. Means the storm's bringing more than just rain." As if on cue, thunder rumbled in the distance. Not the friendly kind that announced a summer shower, but something deeper, angrier, the kind that rattled your bones. They ate a quick supper, neither of them very hungry. Eliza kept glancing out the window, watching the clouds roll closer. She'd seen storms in Philadelphia, sure, but nothing like this. Nothing that made the whole world feel like it was holding its breath. "We should get some sleep," Caleb said, "while we can." "You think it'll hit tonight?" "Maybe. Maybe not till morning. Either way, we'll need our rest." But Eliza couldn't sleep. She lay in her narrow bed, listening to the wind pick up, feeling the house creak and settle around her. Around midnight, the first drops of rain began, fat, heavy drops that hit the roof like bullets. Then the deluge came. It wasn't rain, not really. It was a wall of water falling so hard and fast that Eliza couldn't see anything beyond the window. Thunder cracked overhead, so loud it felt like the sky was splitting open. Lightning lit up her room in brilliant white flashes. She heard Caleb moving around in the front room, heard him checking the windows, the door. She got up, pulled a shawl around her shoulders, and joined him. "It's bad," he said without preamble. "I noticed." "No, I mean..." Another crack of thunder drowned him out. When it passed, he continued. "I've seen storms out here before. This is different. This is..." The wind hit like a fist. The whole house shuddered, and Eliza heard something tear loose outside. Wood splintering, metal shrieking. "Chicken coop," Caleb said grimly. "Damn it. We can't go out there." "I know." His jaw was tight with frustration. "But if the roof comes off, the chickens will have to fend for themselves. We can't risk it." He looked at her, seemed about to argue, then nodded. "You're right. Get away from the windows. If the glass breaks..." It broke. The window near the fireplace exploded inward, spraying glass and rain across the floor. Eliza stumbled backward, felt Caleb's arm come around her, pulling her toward the center of the room. "The cellar!" he shouted over the wind. "We need to get to the cellar!" The root cellar was accessed through a door in the floor near the back wall. Caleb yanked it open, revealing steep wooden steps descending into darkness. "Go!" Eliza didn't argue. She grabbed the lamp Caleb thrust at her and started down. The steps were slick, treacherous. Behind her, she heard Caleb following, heard him slam the door shut above them. The cellar was small, maybe 8 feet by 8 feet, with a dirt floor and walls lined with shelves holding preserves and root vegetables. It smelled of earth and dampness. The ceiling was low enough that Caleb had to hunch. Above them, the storm raged. They could hear it, the wind screaming, things crashing, the house groaning under the assault. It sounded like the world was ending. Eliza set the lamp on a shelf with shaking hands. In its flickering light, she could see Caleb's face, tense and grim. How long will it last? She asked. No way to know. Could be an hour, could be all night. Something heavy crashed overhead. Dust rained down from the ceiling boards. That was the roof, Caleb said quietly. You don't know that. I know that sound. They sat down on the dirt floor, backs against the wall, and waited. There was nothing else to do. Minutes crawled by, marked by the fury of the storm above. Sometimes the wind would seem to ease, and Eliza would think maybe it was over, but then it would come back even stronger. Tell me about Philadelphia, Caleb said suddenly. Eliza looked at him, surprised. What? Tell me about it, your life there, anything. I need to hear something besides this damn storm. So Eliza talked. She told him about the narrow row house where she'd grown up, about her aunt who'd taken her in after her parents died of cholera, about the factory where she'd worked before the agency found her, sewing shirts for 12 hours a day, about the one friend she'd had, a girl named Mary who'd married a butcher and moved to Boston. Caleb listened, asking questions occasionally, and Eliza realized he was doing it to distract her, to keep her calm. It was working. As long as she talked, she didn't think about the tons of earth above them, the house that might be falling apart, the morning that might never come. Your turn, she said when she ran out of stories. Tell me something. Like what? Anything. Where you grew up. How you ended up here. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Missouri, originally. Farm country. Had 3 brothers, all older. I was the youngest, which meant I got all the worst jobs and none of the inheritance. When I turned 18, I headed west. Worked on ranches, learned the trade, saved every penny. Bought this land when I was 25, got it cheap because nobody else wanted it. Too far from town, soil's not great, water's unreliable. But you made it work. Yeah, built the house, bought some cattle, scraped by. Then I met Rebecca at a church social in Ashford. She was visiting from back east, staying with her cousin. Prettiest thing I'd ever seen. His voice went distant. I couldn't believe she'd even look at me, much less say yes when I proposed. Her family didn't want her to marry me, said I was beneath her, which was probably true. But she was stubborn. We got married anyway. What was she like? Delicate. That's the word everyone used. Like a flower, they said. And she was soft-spoken, gentle, hated conflict. Hated this place too, I think, though she never said it outright. She tried. She really did try. But she wasn't made for this life. And you blame yourself, Eliza said quietly. Caleb's head snapped toward her. What? You blame yourself for bringing her here, for not being able to save her when she got sick. He stopped, swallowed hard. Yeah, I do. I should have gotten the doctor sooner, should have seen how bad it was getting. Caleb, you can't control illness. You can't control death. I could have tried harder. You probably tried as hard as anyone could, and she still died. Because sometimes that's what happens. Not because you failed, but because that's life. The words hung in the small space between them. Above, the storm continued its assault, but down here, in this moment, something shifted. Is that what you tell yourself? Caleb asked. About your leg, that it's just life? Every day. Because the alternative is spending my whole life angry at something I can't change. Eliza met his eyes. I was 6 when the fever hit. They didn't think I'd survive. When I did, everyone acted like I should be grateful. Grateful to be alive. Grateful to have any kind of future, even if it meant I'd always limp, always struggle. And maybe I should be grateful. But mostly I'm just tired of people thinking they know what I can and can't do based on something that happened when I was a child. I don't think that. I know. That's why I'm still here. Thunder crashed overhead, so loud that Eliza's ears rang. The lamp flickered, and for a horrible moment she thought it would go out, leaving them in complete darkness. But it held. Caleb reached out and took her hand, just held it, his calloused palm warm against hers. They sat like that for a long time, listening to the storm, not speaking. And somehow, despite everything, Eliza felt safer than she had in years. The storm finally broke around dawn. The wind died down, the rain eased to a drizzle, and the terrible roaring quieted to occasional rumbles of distant thunder. Caleb stood up, joints cracking. Stay here. I'm going to check the damage. I'm coming with you. Eliza, I'm coming with you." He looked like he wanted to argue. They climbed the steps together, Caleb pushing open the cellar door carefully. The damage was worse than Eliza had imagined. The window wasn't just broken, the entire frame had been torn away. Rain had soaked half the floor. The door to her room was hanging at an angle, one hinge ripped loose, and when they looked up, they could see sky through a hole in the roof. "Could be worse," Caleb said, but his voice was hollow. They went outside. The chicken coop was completely gone, just scattered boards and debris. Chickens were everywhere, huddled under the porch, perched on what was left of the fence, one even sitting on top of the barn. The vegetable garden Eliza had worked so hard on was destroyed, plants torn up and scattered. But the barn was still standing. The house was still standing. They were still standing. "We'll fix it," Eliza said. "With what money? What materials?" Caleb ran a hand through his hair. This is bad, Eliza. I don't know if we can come back from this." "We will. One thing at a time. First, we round up the chickens. Then we assess what can be salvaged. Then we—" "Wait." Caleb held up a hand. "You hear that?" Eliza listened. Somewhere in the distance, someone was shouting. They looked at each other, then started running toward the sound. It was coming from the direction of the Hammond property, where the fence line separated their land. What they found made Eliza's stomach drop. A huge cottonwood tree had come down in the storm, falling across the fence and partially crushing a wagon beneath it. A man was trapped underneath, pinned from the waist down. And not just any man, Porter Hammond. Two of the Hammond ranch hands were trying to lift the tree, but it was too heavy. They stopped when they saw Caleb and Eliza approaching. "Ward," one of them said, "thank hell. We need help. Porter went out checking fences when the storm hit. Tree came down on him. We can't lift it." Caleb stopped, staring at Porter. The man who'd threatened him, insulted Eliza, made their lives hell for weeks. The man whose father was trying to steal their land. Porter was conscious, his face gray with pain. "Ward," he gasped out, "please, I can't feel my legs." "Caleb," Eliza said quietly. He didn't respond, just kept staring at Porter with an expression she couldn't read. "Caleb," she repeated, more urgently. "Give me one good reason," Caleb said, his voice dangerously quiet, "why I should help you." "Because he'll die if you don't," one of the ranch hands said. "Maybe he deserves to." "Caleb," Eliza grabbed his arm. "We can't just leave him." "Why not?" "He'd leave me. Hell, he'd probably laugh while he did it." Porter coughed, and blood flecked his lips. "Ward, please. I know we've done wrong by you, but please, don't let me die like this." Caleb was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Get me a rope and something to use as a lever. And someone needs to ride to town. Get the doctor." The ranch hands jumped into action. One rode off at a gallop toward Ashford. The other brought rope and a sturdy branch that had broken off the fallen tree. "We're going to lift this enough for you to pull him out," Caleb told Eliza. "When I say go, you drag him clear. Don't worry about being gentle. Just get him out fast." Eliza nodded, positioning herself near Porter's shoulders. Up close, she could see how bad it was. His legs were at wrong angles, and there was blood, a lot of it, soaking into the ground beneath him. Caleb and the ranch hand positioned the lever under the tree trunk. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. They heaved. The tree lifted maybe 6 inches. It wasn't much. "Go!" Caleb shouted. Eliza grabbed Porter under the arms and pulled. He screamed, a sound that would haunt her nightmares, but she kept pulling. Her bad leg buckled and she fell backward, but she had him. Porter was clear of the tree. Caleb and the ranch hand let it drop with a heavy thud. "Jesus," the ranch hand breathed, looking at Porter's legs. "That's bad." It was worse than bad. One leg was clearly broken in multiple places. The other was crushed, bleeding heavily from a gash that had probably severed an artery. "He's going to bleed out before the doc gets here," the ranch hand said. Eliza was already moving. "I need cloth, bandages, anything clean, and something to tie off that leg above the wound." "What are you doing?" Caleb asked. "What has to be done? Move." She knelt beside Porter, ignoring the protest from her own leg. The bleeding was the immediate threat. She could see the artery pumping blood with each heartbeat. "Give me your belt," she told the ranch hand. He fumbled it off and handed it over. Eliza wrapped it around Porter's thigh, just above the worst of the damage, and pulled it tight. Porter screamed again, then passed out. "That's probably better," Eliza muttered. She tied off the belt, then examined the wound. The bleeding had slowed but hadn't stopped. She could see bone, torn muscle, things that shouldn't be visible. "Eliza, what are you doing?" Caleb asked again. "I need clean water and whiskey, now." Caleb ran. The ranch hand just stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "Don't just stand there," Eliza snapped. "Find me something to splint that other leg. Wood, metal, anything straight and sturdy." The man scrambled to obey. Eliza focused on the bleeding leg, trying to remember everything she'd learned working in the factory where injuries were common and doctors were expensive. She'd seen men lose fingers, get crushed by machinery, and she'd watched other women patch them up because there was no other choice. Caleb returned with a bucket of water and a bottle of whiskey. "What else?" "I need you to hold him still when he wakes up. This is going to hurt." She poured whiskey over her hands, then over the wound. Porter jerked awake with a howl. "Hold him!" Eliza commanded. Caleb and the ranch hand pinned Porter's shoulders. Eliza worked fast, cleaning the wound as best she could, looking for the source of the bleeding. There. The artery was torn but not completely severed. If she could just... Her fingers found the edges of the tear. In the factory, she'd once seen a woman stitch up a man's arm with regular sewing thread when he'd been caught in the loom. It had worked. It had kept him from bleeding out. "I need needle and thread, strong thread." "Eliza, you can't." "I can and I will. Get it. Now." Caleb ran again. Eliza kept pressure on the artery, feeling it pulse weakly under her fingers. Porter had passed out again, which was a mercy. When Caleb returned with the sewing kit from the house, his hands were shaking as he handed it to her. "You've never done this before?" "No, but he dies if I don't try." "You're not a doctor." "I'm what he's got." Eliza threaded the needle, poured more whiskey over it. "Now either help me or get out of my way." Caleb stayed. He held the wound open while Eliza worked, stitching the artery with tiny, careful stitches. Her hands were steadier than she'd expected. She focused on each stitch, blocking out everything else. The blood, the raw meat smell, Porter's labored breathing. 5 stitches. 6. 7. The bleeding slowed to a seep. "Bandages," she said. Caleb handed them over. Eliza wrapped the leg tightly, then moved to the broken one. The ranch hand had found some boards. Together, they splinted it as well as they could. By the time they finished, Eliza's hands were covered in blood. Her dress was soaked with it, and Porter was still unconscious but breathing. "Is he going to make it?" the ranch hand asked. "I don't know. Depends on if infection sets in. If there's internal damage I couldn't see." Eliza sat back on her heels, suddenly exhausted. "But he's got a chance. That's more than he had 10 minutes ago." The sound of hoofbeats announced the doctor's arrival. He was an older man, gray-haired and professional-looking. He took one look at the scene and dismounted quickly. "What happened?" The ranch hand explained while the doctor examined Porter. He checked the tourniquet, the stitches, the splint. When he looked up at Eliza, his expression was unreadable. "Who did this work?" "I did," Eliza said. "You have medical training?" "No." "Then how—" He stopped, shook his head. "Never mind. You probably saved his life. These stitches won't hold long-term, but they'll get him to town. The tourniquet was applied correctly. The splint is adequate." He looked at her with something that might have been respect. "Well done, Mrs. Ward." Eliza blinked. It was the first time anyone besides Caleb had called her that with anything other than derision. They got Porter loaded into a wagon the doctor had brought. As they were preparing to leave, Curtis Hammond came riding up hard, his face wild with panic. "Porter, where's my son?" "Here, Mr. Hammond," the doctor said. "He's alive, but we need to get him to town immediately. The tree—" Curtis saw Porter's condition and went white. Then his gaze swung to Caleb. "You did this." "The storm did this," Caleb said evenly. "You probably cut that tree yourself, waited for him. Your son was trapped under that tree bleeding out," Eliza interrupted, standing up. "Caleb helped pull him free. I stitched his leg to keep him from dying. So before you start making accusations, maybe you should say thank you." Curtis stared at her, then at Porter, then back at her. You stitched his leg?" "Someone had to." The doctor cleared his throat. "Mr. Hammond, we really need to go. Your son needs surgery, proper care. Mrs. Ward has given him a fighting chance, but he's not out of danger." Curtis looked at Caleb one more time, and Eliza saw something crack in his expression, the hatred giving way to something more complicated. Then he climbed into the wagon beside his son, and they were gone, racing toward Ashford. The ranch hand lingered. "I'll tell folks what really happened here," he said quietly to Caleb. "What you did, what she did, they should know." Then he was gone too, and Eliza and Caleb were alone among the wreckage of the storm. Caleb looked at Eliza, really looked at her. At the blood on her hands, the exhaustion in her face, the way she was swaying on her feet. "You saved him," he said. "We saved him. You pulled him out." "I almost didn't. I wanted to leave him there." "I know. But you didn't." Caleb stepped closer, and Eliza saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Wonder, maybe. Awe. "Where did you learn to do that? The stitching?" "The factory. Women got hurt all the time. We learned to patch each other up." Eliza looked down at her bloody hands. "I've never done anything like that before, though. I wasn't sure it would work." "It did." He reached out, gently took her hands in his. "You're shaking." "I know. Come on, let's get you cleaned up." But when Eliza tried to walk, her leg finally gave out. Caleb caught her before she fell, scooped her up like he had that day with the cattle. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "No, you can't. Not right now." He carried her toward the house, stepping over debris. "You just performed surgery in the middle of a field. You're allowed to be human for a minute." Eliza let her head rest against his shoulder, too tired to argue. She could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong. Could smell the storm on him, earth and rain, and something fundamentally him. Inside the damaged house, Caleb set her down gently on one of the chairs. He brought water, helped her wash the blood from her hands. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. When her hands were clean, Caleb knelt in front of her, still holding them. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for what you did out there, for being better than I was. You would have helped him eventually. Maybe. Maybe not. But you didn't hesitate. Even after everything he's done to us." Eliza met his eyes. "Because that's not who I am. That's not who we are. We can be better than them, Caleb. We have to be." He nodded slowly. Then, carefully, he leaned forward and kissed her forehead, just a brief press of lips against skin, but it felt like a promise. "Yeah," he said, "we do." Outside, the sun was rising over the wrecked prairie, turning the storm clouds gold. There was so much to do, so much to fix. But for this moment, Eliza let herself rest. They'd survived the storm. They'd saved a life. And in doing so, maybe, just maybe, they'd changed something fundamental about who they were to each other. The future was uncertain. The damage was real. But they were still here, still standing, still together. And that, Eliza thought, was enough. The week after the storm passed in a blur of exhaustion and rebuilding. Eliza and Caleb worked from sunrise to sunset, patching the roof, replacing the window, salvaging what they could from the wreckage. Her hands developed new calluses on top of the old ones. His shoulder, the one that predicted storms, bothered him constantly, but he never complained. They didn't talk about what had happened with Porter. Didn't talk about the kiss on her forehead or the way something had shifted between them in that moment. They just worked, side by side, rebuilding their small piece of the world. On the fourth day, a wagon arrived. Eliza saw it coming from where she was hammering boards back onto the chicken coop and felt her stomach tighten. More trouble, probably. It seemed like that was all they got these days. But when the wagon pulled up, it wasn't Curtis Hammond driving it. It was the ranch hand who'd been there when Porter got hurt, a young man named Tom, who looked uncomfortable in his clean shirt and hat. "Mrs. Ward," he said, climbing down. "Mr. Ward." Caleb approached, hammer still in hand. "What do you want?" "Mr. Hammond sent me. Asked me to deliver this." Tom pulled a crate from the wagon bed. "Said it was for the repairs, for your trouble." Caleb stared at the crate like it might bite him. Eliza moved closer, curiosity overriding caution. Inside were supplies, nails, wire, fresh lumber, even some glass panes for the window. "He's paying us off," Caleb said flatly, trying to ease his conscience. "I don't think so, sir," Tom said carefully. I think he's trying to say thank you. He's not good at words, Mr. Hammond isn't. But after what you and Mrs. Ward did for Porter, well, this is how he says it." "How is Porter?" Eliza asked. Tom's expression softened. "Alive. Doc says he'll keep the leg, though he might not walk right again. But he's alive, and the doc says that's because of what you did, ma'am. The stitching, the tourniquet. You bought him enough time. Something twisted in Eliza's chest. Porter would limp now, like her. Would know what it was like to have people look at you differently, to struggle with things that used to be easy. She wasn't sure if that was justice or just cruel irony. There's something else, Tom said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out an envelope and handed it to Caleb. Mr. Hammond wanted you to have this too. Caleb opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper, a deed transfer, signed and notarized, giving Caleb ownership of a strip of land along their shared fence line, the same fence line where Porter had been trapped. I don't understand, Caleb said slowly. It's the land where the tree fell. Mr. Hammond says it's yours now, payment for saving his son's life. He's also promising to leave you alone. No more cut fences, no more trouble. He put it in writing. Tom shifted uncomfortably. He asked me to tell you he's sorry. For everything. For what Porter did, for what he did. He knows it doesn't fix things, but it's a start. Caleb looked at the deed like it might disappear if he blinked. This land, this is good grazing land. Water access. It's worth... I know what it's worth, sir. So does Mr. Hammond. That's why he's giving it to you. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back hard. This was what they'd been fighting for. What had seemed impossible just a week ago. Peace. Space to breathe. Tell Mr. Hammond, Caleb said slowly, that we accept, and that we hope Porter recovers fully. Tom nodded, looking relieved. I will, sir, ma'am. He tipped his hat to Eliza. You're a good woman, Mrs. Ward. What you did, most people wouldn't have. People are talking about it in town, about how you saved a man who'd done you wrong. That takes character. After Tom left, Eliza and Caleb stood in the yard, staring at the crate of supplies and the deed. We won, Eliza said quietly. Yeah, Caleb's voice was rough. We did. So why doesn't it feel like winning? Because it cost too much. Because we almost lost everything. Because Porter's going to spend the rest of his life limping, and even though he probably deserves it, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. He looked at her. You know what I mean. Yeah, I do. Eliza folded the deed carefully. But we're still here. The ranch is still standing, and now we have room to grow. Caleb's expression shifted, something easing in his features. Yeah, we do. He reached out, took her hand. Thank you? For what? For being better than I am. For seeing past the hate. For... He stopped, seemed to struggle with words. For everything. Eliza squeezed his hand. We're partners, remember? That's what partners do. Something flickered in his eyes, heat, want, something that made Eliza's breath catch. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. Really kiss her, not just her forehead. Instead, he cleared his throat and stepped back. We should get back to work. Roof's not going to fix itself. The moment passed, but it left something behind, a tension that hadn't been there before, charged and waiting. Over the next 2 weeks, word spread about what Eliza had done. People started showing up at the ranch, neighbors she hadn't met, townspeople from Ashford, even the doctor who'd treated Porter. They came with questions at first, then with requests. A woman whose son had cut his hand badly on a plow blade. Could Mrs. Ward take a look? A man whose wife was having trouble with a pregnancy. Could Mrs. Ward come by, maybe sit with her? A child with a fever that wouldn't break. Could Mrs. Ward at least try? Eliza said yes every time, even though she had no formal training, even though she was terrified of making things worse. But she'd learned something saving Porter, that sometimes doing something was better than doing nothing. That her hands, clumsy as they might be at other things, were steady when it mattered. Caleb watched her gain confidence, watched her become someone the community turned to. And with each person she helped, his expression grew more complicated. Pride mixed with something else, something Eliza couldn't quite name. One evening, after she'd spent the afternoon helping deliver a breech calf at a neighboring ranch, she came home to find Caleb sitting on the porch steps waiting for her. Successful? He asked. The calf lived? The mother lived. So yes, I'd say successful. Eliza sat down beside him with a groan. Though I'm never going to get the smell out of this dress. Burn it. I'll buy you a new one. With what money? With the money from the extra land Hammond gave us. I've been thinking, with that grazing access, we could double our herd, maybe even hire a hand to help with the work. He paused. If you want to keep doing this other thing, the helping people thing, you'll... Eliza looked at him sharply. You want me to keep doing it? I want you to do whatever makes you happy. And you're good at it, Eliza. Really good. People trust you. I'm not a doctor. No, you're better. You're someone who understands what it's like to need help and not be able to afford it. Someone who doesn't judge. He met her eyes. You've become important to this community. More important than I ever was. That's not true. It is, and it's good. It means we're not alone out here anymore. It means we have allies. Eliza thought about that, about the women who'd started inviting her to quilting circles, the men who'd helped Caleb repair the barn without being asked, the way people nodded respectfully when she rode into town. She'd gone from being the unwanted bride to being someone people sought out. I never expected this, she said softly. Neither did I. Caleb's hand found hers in the growing darkness. But I'm glad it happened. I'm glad you're here. Even though I don't follow orders? Especially because you don't follow orders. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the prairie. The land they'd fought for, almost lost, and somehow kept. It looked different now. Not just theirs, but home. Caleb, Eliza said suddenly, why did you really choose me? That day at the depot. You said it was because I was still standing, but there's more to it than that. I can tell. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, when Rebecca died, I thought I'd died too. I went through the motions, worked the ranch, ate, slept, but I wasn't living. I was just surviving. And then months turned into years and people kept telling me I should move on, find someone else, but I couldn't. Every woman I met, all I could see was what they weren't. They weren't Rebecca. He paused, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. Then I saw you on the platform, standing there while everyone else got chosen, while people laughed and made their comments. And you didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't try to make yourself smaller or more palatable. You just stood there and took it. And I thought, there's someone who knows what loss feels like. Someone who's been broken and put herself back together. Someone strong enough to survive this life. Eliza's throat tightened. You saw all that in a few minutes? I saw enough. And I wasn't wrong, was I? I don't know. Maybe you were. I'm not as strong as you think. You're stronger. He turned to face her fully. You saved a man who tried to destroy us. You've built a place for yourself in a community that rejected you. You've taken a broken-down ranch and a broken-down man and made something good out of both. If that's not strength, I don't know what is. You're not broken, Eliza said firmly. Maybe not anymore, but I was. You fixed that too. Before she could respond, Caleb leaned in and kissed her. Not on the forehead this time, but on the mouth, soft and careful and full of question. Eliza answered by kissing him back. Her hands came up to his face, feeling the rough stubble there, the warmth of his skin. He tasted like coffee and something darker, something that made her want more. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. I didn't plan that, he said. I'm glad you didn't. Planning would have ruined it. Eliza, He stopped, seemed to struggle. I don't want this to be just a business arrangement anymore. I don't want separate rooms and careful distance. I know what you want. I want it too. Relief flooded his features. Yeah. She kissed him again, softer this time. But we're going to do this right. No rushing, no assumptions. We figure it out together. Together, he agreed. I can do that. They stayed on the porch until the stars came out, talking quietly, making plans. For the ranch, for themselves, for the future that suddenly seemed possible. When they finally went inside, Caleb walked her to her door, the door she'd locked every night since arriving, the barrier between them. Good night, Eliza, he said. She reached up, kissed him once more. Good night, Caleb. That night, for the first time, she left her door unlocked. Not an invitation exactly, but a promise. They had time now. Time to become more than just partners surviving together. Time to become something real. The next morning, Eliza woke to find Caleb already gone. A note on the table saying he'd ridden to town for supplies. She made breakfast, fed the animals, started on the endless list of chores that defined ranch life. She was mending a fence when she heard horses, multiple horses, moving fast. Her first thought was the Hammonds, that the peace had been too good to last. But when the riders came into view, she saw it was a group from town. The doctor, the sheriff, and several men she recognized from church. The doctor dismounted quickly. "Mrs. Ward, thank heavens you're here. We need your help." "What's wrong?" "There's been an accident. A wagon overturned on the road to Ashford, a family traveling through. The mother's badly hurt, and we can't move her. The doctor in town is dealing with a difficult childbirth, and I can't leave her. But this woman, she needs help now." Liza's heart raced. "I'm not qualified. You're what we have, please. There are children involved." That decided it. Eliza grabbed her shawl and the medical kit she'd started assembling. Bandages, thread, scissors, whiskey for disinfecting. "Where?" "About 5 miles south. We have horses." Eliza looked at the horse they'd brought for her and felt her stomach drop. She'd never ridden before, had avoided it because of her leg. "I can't ride." "You'll have to learn fast. Or we can ride double, but that'll slow us down." Eliza thought of children waiting, a woman bleeding. "Teach me." They got her into the saddle somehow, though it took 3 tries and left her clutching the horn like it was the only thing keeping her alive. The ride was terrifying. Every jolt sent pain shooting through her bad hip. Every movement made her certain she'd fall. But she held on, teeth gritted, focusing on the horizon. When they reached the accident site, it was worse than she'd expected. The wagon had gone off the road and rolled, scattering belongings everywhere. A man knelt beside a woman lying too still on the ground. 2 children, a girl about 10 and a boy maybe 6, huddled nearby, crying. Eliza half fell off the horse, barely catching herself. She limped to the woman, ignoring the screaming in her leg. "What happened?" "Wheel hit a rock. Whole thing just went over," the husband said, his voice shaking. "Mary, she got thrown, hit her head. And her arm, it's—" He gestured helplessly. Eliza knelt beside the woman. Mary was unconscious, breathing shallowly. Her right arm bent at an angle that made Eliza's stomach turn. Compound fracture, bone visible through the skin. There was blood, but not as much as there could have been. "Get me clean water and cloth," Eliza said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "And something to splint this arm, and I need space. Everyone back except the doctor." They obeyed. Eliza examined Mary carefully. The head wound was superficial, bleeding but not deep. The arm was the real problem, broken badly, contaminated with dirt. If infection set in, she could lose it. "We need to set this and get her to town," the doctor said quietly. "But I can't do it alone. The bone needs to go back in place before we splint it." Eliza had never set a bone in her life, but she'd watched it done once, years ago, when a factory worker had fallen. "Tell me what to do." The doctor guided her through it. How to pull traction on the arm while he manipulated the bone back into alignment. It took 3 tries and Mary waking up screaming before they got it right. But they did it, got the bone set, the wound cleaned and stitched, the arm splinted. By the time they finished, Eliza was shaking so hard she could barely stand. But Mary was stable, her husband was crying with relief, and the children had stopped screaming. "You did well," the doctor said quietly. "Very well. Most people would have panicked." "I was panicking," Eliza admitted. "I just didn't stop working." They got Mary into a wagon, carefully, slowly, and headed for town. Eliza rode back on the same terrifying horse, every muscle in her body protesting. When they finally reached the ranch, she slid off the horse and immediately sat down in the dirt, too exhausted to care about dignity. Caleb found her there 20 minutes later. He took one look at her and dropped the supplies he was carrying. "What happened?" "Are you hurt?" Eliza laughed, though it came out more like a sob. "I just set a broken bone, and I rode a horse, twice, and I think I'm going to die." He knelt beside her. "You rode a horse?" "It was awful. I hated every second. But there was a woman and children and—" She stopped, realized she was crying. "I had no idea what I was doing, Caleb. I could have made it worse. I could have killed her." "But you didn't. You helped." He pulled her into his arms, held her tight. "You helped, and that's what matters." Eliza buried her face in his shoulder and let herself fall apart for a minute. Let him hold her while the fear and adrenaline drained away, leaving only exhaustion. "I can't keep doing this," she said into his shirt. "I'm not qualified. What if next time I make a mistake? What if someone dies because I didn't know what I was doing?" "Then you'll deal with it. and I'll be right here with you." He pulled back, cupped her face in his hands. "You're saving lives, Eliza. You think doctors don't make... You think they don't lose patients? But they keep trying because trying is better than giving up. And you're not giving up. How do you know? Because you're you, and giving up isn't in your nature." She kissed him then, hard and desperate, needing the contact. He kissed her back just as fiercely, his hands in her hair, holding her like she was precious. When they finally broke apart, Eliza said, "Take me inside, please. I need to lie down before I fall down." Caleb scooped her up. It was becoming a habit, and carried her into the house. But instead of taking her to her room, he took her to his, set her down on his bed, wider, more comfortable than her narrow cot. "Stay here," he said. "Rest. I'll handle everything else today." "Caleb, no arguments. You've earned it." He kissed her forehead. "Sleep. I'll wake you for supper." Eliza wanted to protest, but exhaustion won. She lay back on his bed, which smelled like him, leather and soap and something indefinably male, and closed her eyes. She was asleep in seconds. When she woke, it was evening. The light coming through the window was golden, soft, and Caleb was sitting in a chair beside the bed, reading an old newspaper. "How long was I out?" Eliza asked, her voice rough. "About 6 hours. How do you feel?" "Like I got trampled by a horse." "Close enough." He set the paper aside. "Mary's going to be fine, by the way. The doctor sent word. Arm should heal clean, no infection. He said to tell you that you did perfect work." Relief flooded through her. "Really? Really? You're a natural, apparently. He's been telling everyone in town about it. I think you're going to have even more people asking for help now." Eliza groaned. "That's what I was afraid of." "Hey." Caleb moved to sit on the edge of the bed. "You don't have to do it if you don't want to. You can say no." "I know, but I won't. Because you're right. Trying is better than giving up." She reached for his hand. "But I'm going to need help. I need to learn more, do it right. Maybe the doctor could teach me properly. I'll talk to him. I'm sure he'd be happy to." Caleb's thumb traced patterns on her palm. "You know what this means, right? You're not just my wife anymore. You're the person this whole community depends on. That's responsibility. That's pressure." "I know. And you're okay with that?" Eliza thought about it. About the weight of expectations, the fear of failure, the constant demands. About how different it was from being invisible and unwanted. "Yeah," she said, "I'm okay with it, because it means I matter. I make a difference. And that's all I ever wanted." Caleb leaned down and kissed her, slow and sweet. "You've always mattered. I just don't think anyone bothered to tell you before." "You did. That day at the depot. Best decision I ever made. Even when I don't follow orders? Especially then." They stayed like that for a while, talking quietly as the sun set. Caleb told her about the supplies he'd bought, the plans he had for expanding the herd. Eliza told him about her ideas for learning more medicine, maybe even getting some proper books on the subject. They were building something together. Not just a ranch, not just a marriage, but a life. Messy and complicated and nothing like what either of them had planned. But it was theirs. And that made it perfect. That night, Eliza didn't return to her own room. She stayed in Caleb's bed, and he stayed with her. Not out of obligation or arrangement, but because neither of them wanted to be apart. They held each other in the darkness, talking until their words grew soft and sleepy, until finally they drifted off tangled together. It wasn't perfect. Caleb snored. Eliza's leg cramped in the middle of the night, and she had to get up to walk it off. But when she came back to bed, he pulled her close without waking, and that felt more intimate than anything else that had happened between them. Morning came too early, as it always did. But this time, Eliza woke to find Caleb watching her, his expression softer than she'd ever seen it. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Nothing, just, I'm glad you're here. You've said that before." "I know, but I mean it more now." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I think I'm falling in love with you, Eliza Ward." The words hung in the air between them, vulnerable and honest. Eliza's breath caught. "You think?" "I know. I just didn't want to scare you by saying it too definitely." Eliza laughed, the sound surprising her. "Caleb, I rode a horse yesterday, twice, and set a broken bone. I'm not scared of words." "Fair point." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his whole face. "So what do you say? You falling in love with me too?" "I think I started falling the day you chose me. I just didn't know it yet." She kissed him, morning breath and all. "So yeah, I'm falling. Maybe already fell." They stayed in bed longer than they should have, making up for lost time, learning each other's bodies with the careful attention of people who knew they had a lifetime to get it right. When they finally emerged, the sun was high, and the chickens were complaining loudly about being fed late. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Not easier exactly, but fuller. Caleb expanded the herd with the new grazing land, hired a young man named Jesse to help with the heavy work. Eliza spent 3 mornings a week in town with the doctor, learning everything he'd teach her: anatomy, wound care, how to recognize different illnesses, how to deliver babies safely. The rest of her time went to the ranch and to helping neighbors who needed her skills. She stitched cuts, set bones, sat with sick children through long nights. Some people paid her with money, most with food or favors or promises to help when the wards needed it. The community began to shift around them. Women who'd once whispered about the crippled bride now invited Eliza to sit with them at church socials. Men who doubted Caleb's ability to keep the ranch running now asked his advice on cattle and crops. The wards weren't outsiders anymore. They were part of the fabric of the place. 3 months after the storm, Curtis Hammond showed up at their door. Alone this time, hat in his hands, looking older than Eliza remembered. "Mr. Ward, Mrs. Ward," he said formally. "I was hoping I could speak with you both." Caleb tensed, but Eliza touched his arm gently. "Come in, Mr. Hammond. I'll make coffee." They sat at the table, the same table where Eliza and Caleb had eaten their first awkward meals together. Hammond looked uncomfortable, his big hands wrapped around the coffee cup. "Porter's walking again," he said abruptly. "Doc says he'll always limp, always have pain, but he's walking and he's alive, because of what you did, Mrs. Ward." "I'm glad he's recovering," Eliza said carefully. "He wants to apologize, to both of you, for everything he did, everything we did. But he's ashamed. Doesn't think you'd want to see him." Hammond cleared his throat. "So I came instead, to say what he can't, what I should have said months ago." "We're listening," Caleb said, his voice neutral. "I was wrong. About you, about this place, about what it takes to survive out here. I thought strength was about being hard, taking what you want, crushing anyone who got in your way. That's how I built my ranch, how I raised my son." Hammond's voice cracked slightly. "And I almost lost him because of it. Almost lost him because he was out trying to sabotage your fence when that tree came down. Because I taught him that neighbors were enemies, not people." He looked up, meeting their eyes. "You could have let him die. Nobody would have blamed you, but you didn't. You saved him, even knowing what he'd done to you. That's real strength. That's what I should have taught him all along." Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back, reached across the table to touch Hammond's hand briefly. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do after. Porter wants to make it right. We both do. I was thinking, my ranch is big, but I'm getting old. And Porter, he can't do the heavy work anymore. We could use partners. Real partners, not just hired hands. Equal split on the profits, shared use of the land." Hammond looked at Caleb. "What do you say, Ward? Think we could try being neighbors instead of enemies?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Eliza could see him working through it, weighing risks and benefits, past hurts against future possibilities. "Equal partners?" he asked finally. "Equal. I've got the papers drawn up already if you're willing. And Porter? He's really sorry?" "He is. Changed man, honestly. Getting hurt like that, having to learn to walk again, it humbled him. Made him think about what kind of person he wants to be." Hammond smiled sadly. Turns out getting saved by the woman he insulted was good for his character. Caleb looked at Eliza. She could see the question in his eyes. "What do you think?" She thought about holding grudges versus building bridges, about how she'd felt being the last one standing on that platform, and how different her life was now because one person had chosen to see past the obvious. "I think," Eliza said slowly, "that everyone deserves a second chance, if they're willing to earn it." Caleb nodded. "Then we'll try it. Partners." Hammond's relief was visible. He stood, shook Caleb's hand firmly, then, surprising both of them, shook Eliza's too. "Thank you, both of you, for being better people than we deserved. After he left, Caleb pulled Eliza into his arms. You sure about this? Partnering with the Hammonds? No, but I'm sure about taking chances on. Someone took a chance on me once, changed my whole life. Best gamble I ever made, Caleb murmured into her hair. The partnership proved to be good for everyone. The combined resources meant better breeding stock, shared equipment, help when one ranch needed it. Porter did come to apologize eventually, awkward and sincere, his new limp making him walk almost exactly like Eliza. They talked about it, about the pain and frustration and the way people looked at you differently. I never understood, Porter said quietly, what it was like for you. I thought it meant you were weak. But it doesn't, does it? It just means you hurt, and you keep going anyway. Every day, Eliza agreed, and some days are worse than others, but you learn to live with it. I'm sorry for what I said, what I did. I was cruel. You were. But you're trying to be better now. That counts for something. They didn't become friends exactly, but they became something, two people who understood each other in a way others couldn't. And that was enough. As fall arrived and the first hints of winter touched the prairie, Eliza realized she was happy. Not the desperate, clawing happiness of someone trying to convince themselves everything was fine, but the quiet, settled happiness of someone who'd found their place in the world. She was standing in this rebuilt chicken coop, larger now, better constructed, when Caleb found her one afternoon. Got a surprise for you, he said, looking pleased with himself. Yeah? What kind of surprise? The kind you'll have to come see. He led her to the barn where a gentle mare stood in one of the stalls. Not young, but healthy and calm-looking. Her name's Daisy, Caleb said. She's older, steady. Doc says she's perfect for someone learning to ride. Thought maybe, if you wanted to try again without the panic of an emergency, I could teach you properly. Eliza looked at the horse, at Caleb's hopeful expression, and felt her throat tighten with emotion. He'd been paying attention, had noticed how much she'd hated being helpless on that terrifying ride, how she'd wanted to do better. You bought me a horse? Well, technically we bought her together, partnership and all. But yeah, she's mostly for you, if you want her. Eliza walked to the stall, reached out to stroke Daisy's nose. The mare whuffled softly, gentle and patient. I want to try, Eliza said. Will you help me? Every step of the way. Learning to ride was harder than Eliza expected. Her bad leg made mounting difficult, and sitting in the saddle for more than a few minutes sent pain shooting through her hip. But Caleb was patient, and Daisy was forgiving, and slowly, so slowly, Eliza began to figure it out. The first time she rode around the paddock without Caleb leading her, she felt like she'd conquered the world. It was just a circle, just a gentle walk, but it was freedom, mobility she'd never had before. I did it, she said, laughing when she finally stopped. You did. Caleb helped her down, caught her when her leg buckled, held her steady. I'm proud of you. It's just riding a horse. People do it all the time. It's not just riding, it's you deciding you wouldn't let fear or pain stop you from learning something new. That's everything, Eliza. She kissed him there in the paddock, dusty and sweaty and happier than she'd ever been. Winter came hard that year. The first snow fell in early November, and by December they were snowed in more days than not. But the house was warm, the barn was solid, and they had enough supplies to last. Eliza spent the long evenings reading the medical books the doctor had loaned her, Caleb working on plans for spring planting. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence. Sometimes they went to bed early just to be close to each other, to shut out the cold world and create their own warmth. On Christmas Eve, Caleb gave her a gift, a beautiful leather medical bag, custom made with her initials stamped on it. For all your house calls, he said. Figured you should look professional. Eliza ran her fingers over the smooth leather, overwhelmed. Caleb, this must have cost. Don't care what it cost. You've earned it 100 times over. He pulled out a second, smaller package. This is from Porter and Curtis, actually. They asked me to give it to you. Inside was a small brass nameplate. Eliza Ward, medical practitioner, and a note in shaky handwriting. Porter's, she guessed. Thank you for my life. Put this on your door so everyone knows where to find the best healer in Texas. Eliza cried. She couldn't help it. A year ago, she'd been standing on a depot platform being rejected by everyone. Now she had a home, a husband who loved her, a community that depended on her, and people who thought she was worth thanking. Hey, Caleb said softly, wiping her tears. What's this? I'm just, I'm so grateful. For all of it. For you choosing me, for giving me this chance, for, she gestured helplessly at everything. For seeing something in me worth choosing. Eliza, I didn't give you anything. You earned every bit of this yourself. I got out of your way and let you be who you already were. That's not nothing. That's everything. They held each other as snow fell outside, as the fire crackled in the hearth, as their first Christmas together settled around them like a blessing. Spring brought new challenges and new opportunities. The partnership with the Hammonds meant twice the work, but twice the profit. Jesse proved to be reliable, and they hired 2 more hands to help with the expanded herd. Eliza's medical practice grew. She was delivering babies now, treating serious illnesses, even performing minor surgeries with the doctor's guidance. One warm April morning, Eliza woke feeling sick. She barely made it outside before she threw up, leaving her shaky and confused. The nausea came back the next morning and the next. It took her 3 days to realize what it might mean, another 2 to work up the courage to see the doctor. He confirmed it with a smile. About 2 months along, I'd say. Congratulations, Mrs. Ward. Eliza walked home in a daze. A baby. She was going to have a baby. She'd never even thought about children, had been so focused on survival that motherhood seemed like something that happened to other people. What if she was a terrible mother? What if her bad leg made it impossible to care for a child properly? What if... She found Caleb in the barn, mucking out stalls. He took one look at her face and dropped the pitchfork. What's wrong? Are you sick? I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air between them. Caleb's expression went through several rapid changes. Shock, joy, fear, then settling on something that looked like wonder. We're having a baby? Yeah, Doc says about 2 months, due in October probably. Caleb crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, picked her up and spun her around despite her protest. When he set her down, he was grinning like a fool. We're having a baby, he repeated, like saying it again would make it more real. You're happy? Eliza asked uncertainly. Happy? Eliza, He stopped, cupped her face in his hands. I never thought I'd get this chance again. After Rebecca, after losing her, I thought that part of my life was over, but you've given me everything. A real marriage, a real partnership, and now this. How could I be anything but happy? Relief flooded through her. I'm scared, she admitted. What if I can't do it? What if my leg makes it too hard to care for a baby? Then we'll figure it out together. Same way we figured out everything else. He kissed her forehead. You're going to be an amazing mother, Eliza. You've taken care of half the children in this county. You think you can't handle one of your own? That's different. I give those children back to their parents, and you'll raise ours to be strong and stubborn and unstoppable, just like you. He rested his hand on her still flat stomach. This baby is already the luckiest kid in Texas. The pregnancy was hard. Morning sickness lasted all day for the first 3 months. Her leg got worse as she gained weight, the extra strain making simple tasks difficult. By her 7th month, she could barely walk without pain, but the community rallied. Women brought food, helped with chores. The doctor checked on her weekly, teaching her what to expect, what was normal, and what wasn't. Caleb treated her like she was made of glass, which drove her crazy, but also made her feel cherished. I'm pregnant, not dying, she told him for the 100th time when he tried to stop her from feeding the chickens. I know, but you're carrying precious cargo, our cargo. Let me help. You are helping. You're driving me insane with helping. Good, that's my job. Despite the difficulty, Eliza kept working. She saw patients until her 8th month, only stopping when the doctor insisted. Even then, people came to the house for advice, for reassurance, for the comfort of her steady presence. Porter Hammond showed up one afternoon with his new wife, a quiet woman named Sarah, who was 6 months pregnant herself. They sat on the porch, the 3 of them, comparing symptoms and fears. I'm terrified, Sarah admitted. What if something goes wrong? Something probably will, Eliza said honestly. Birth is messy and painful and unpredictable, but women have been doing it since the beginning of time. We're tougher than we think. Even with... Sarah glanced at Eliza's leg, then looked embarrassed. Even with this, yeah, it'll make some things harder, but I've been dealing with hard my whole life. This is just one more thing. Eliza smiled. Besides, I'll have help. That's the secret, accepting that you can't do it alone. Porter squeezed his wife's hand. You won't be alone, I promise. Watching them, Eliza thought about how far they'd all come. From enemies to something like friends. From broken people to people learning to be whole. Labor started on a cold October night, 3 weeks earlier than expected. Eliza woke to cramping pain and wet sheets, and her first thought was that something was wrong. Caleb, she said, shaking him awake. It's time, but it's too early. He was up instantly, lighting lamps, sending Jessie for the doctor. Within an hour, the house was full. The doctor, 2 midwives from town, and more women than Eliza could count, all there to help. Get out, one of the midwives told Caleb firmly. This is women's work. You'll just be in the way. But Eliza grabbed his hand. No, he stays. I want him here. Mrs. Ward, that's not... I don't care what's proper. He's my husband, and I want him here. So Caleb stayed, holding her hand through each contraction, wiping her face with cool cloths, whispering encouragement when she screamed that she couldn't do this, that it was too much. You can, he kept saying. You're the strongest person I know. You can do anything. The labor lasted 18 hours. 18 hours of pain that made every other hurt in Eliza's life seem trivial. 18 hours of pushing and bleeding and thinking she might actually die. But then, finally, miraculously, there was a baby. A tiny, squalling, perfect baby girl with dark hair and her mother's stubborn cry. It's a girl, the doctor said, laughing as he placed the baby on Eliza's chest. A healthy, loud girl. Eliza looked down at her daughter, at the tiny fingers and scrunched-up face and eyes that would probably be brown like Caleb's, and felt something break open in her chest. Love, fierce and overwhelming and unlike anything she'd ever felt. Hi, she whispered. Hi, baby. I'm your mama. Caleb was crying, openly, unashamedly crying as he looked at his daughter. She's perfect, he said. Eliza, she's perfect. She really is, Eliza agreed, exhausted and exhilarated and completely in love. They named her Rebecca Grace Ward. Rebecca for the woman who'd come before, Grace for the gift they'd been given. Some people thought it was strange, naming the new baby after the dead wife, but Eliza didn't see it that way. Rebecca had been part of Caleb's story, had shaped who he was. Honoring that felt right. Besides, little Becca was her own person from the start, stubborn, loud, demanding attention, and giving nothing but fierce love in return. She had her father's eyes and her mother's determination, and by 3 months old, she'd wrapped the entire community around her tiny fingers. People came from miles around to meet her, bringing gifts and advice and stories. The house was never empty, and Eliza learned to nurse while having conversations, to change diapers while giving medical advice, to function on 3 hours of sleep and still smile. It was exhausting. It was overwhelming. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done. It was perfect. One spring afternoon, when Becca was 6 months old, Eliza sat on the porch with her daughter in her lap, watching Caleb work with the horses in the paddock. The ranch had grown. More land, more cattle, more opportunity. They'd built an addition onto the house, added a proper clinic room for Eliza's practice, hired enough help that Caleb didn't work himself to exhaustion anymore. But the core of it was still the same. Still the two of them, choosing each other every day. Your daddy and I, Eliza said to Becca, who was trying to eat her own toes. We came from broken places. We were people nobody wanted, people who didn't fit, and we could have stayed broken. Could have let that define us forever. Becca gurgled, unimpressed. But we didn't. We chose to build something new, something better. And now we have you, and this community, and a life we made with our own hands. Eliza kissed her daughter's head. That's what I want you to know, baby girl, that you're not defined by where you start or what people say about you. You're defined by your choices, by whether you give up or keep going, by whether you let pain make you bitter or better. Caleb joined them on the porch, sweaty from work but smiling. He kissed Eliza, then Becca, then settled beside them with a satisfied sigh. What are you two talking about? Life lessons, philosophy, the usual? She's 6 months old. Never too early to start. Eliza leaned against him, feeling his solid warmth, his steady presence. I was just thinking about how far we've come. Yeah? Caleb looked out over the ranch. their ranch, their life. Me too. Sometimes I can barely remember what it was like before you, how empty everything was. You would have survived. Survived, yeah, but I wouldn't have lived. There's a difference. He took her hand, the gesture automatic now, after months of marriage. You taught me that. Taught me that survival isn't enough. That we're meant for more than just getting through each day. Eliza thought about that platform in Ashford, about standing there unwanted and alone, about the choice she'd made to follow a stranger into the unknown, about every hard moment since then, the fires and storms, the injuries and fears, the constant struggle to prove herself worthy. It had been worth it. Every painful step had led here, to this moment, to this family, to this life. I love you, she said simply. I love you too, both of you. Caleb smiled at Becca, who'd fallen asleep against Eliza's chest. My strong, stubborn, impossible girls. As the sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Eliza felt a peace she'd never known before. Not the peace of having no problems. They had plenty of those, and always would. But the peace of knowing she could handle whatever came, because she wasn't alone anymore, because she'd found people who saw her value, and she'd learned to see it in herself. She'd been the last woman standing once, the one nobody wanted. Now she was the one everyone needed. The healer, the mother, the backbone of a community. But more than that, she was Eliza Ward. Imperfect and scarred and stronger than anyone had guessed. A woman who'd chosen to keep going when it would have been easier to give up. A woman who'd turned rejection into resilience and pain into purpose. And that, she thought, as she held her sleeping daughter and leaned against her husband, was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The years that followed brought their share of challenges. Drought one summer, harsh winter the next, a fire that took half the barn but spared the house. Becca grew into a wild child who learned to ride before she could properly walk, who followed her mother on medical calls and her father into the fields, absorbing everything. More children came. 2 boys, Thomas and James, born 2 years apart. The house expanded again, got louder, fuller. Eliza's practice grew to the point where she trained 2 younger women to help her, passing on everything the doctor had taught her. Caleb's hair went gray at the temples, and his shoulder ached more in winter. Eliza's limp got worse as she aged, until she needed a cane on bad days. But they aged together, grew older together, built a legacy together. When people asked Eliza about her life, and they often did, especially young women facing their own struggles, she always told them the same thing. I was nobody once, the broken girl nobody wanted, and I could have stayed nobody, could have believed what they said about me. But someone saw past that, and it gave me the courage to see past it too, to choose who I wanted to be instead of accepting who people said I was. She'd pause, looking at whoever had asked, making sure they heard what came next. That's the secret. Not waiting for someone else to choose you or validate you or fix you, but choosing yourself. Deciding you're worth the effort, worth the fight. Everything else, the love, the community, the purpose, all of that comes after. But it starts with you, choosing to keep standing. And she'd meant it, every word. Because Eliza Ward had learned the hard way that strength wasn't about being perfect or whole or wanted by everyone. Strength was about standing back up every time you got knocked down. About choosing hope over bitterness, action over resignation, love over fear. She'd been the last one chosen that day in Ashford. But in the end, that had been exactly right. Because being chosen last meant she'd had to choose herself first, had to find her own worth instead of having it handed to her. And that made all the difference. Years later, when her own daughter stood on the edge of a difficult choice, Eliza told her this. Life will knock you down, baby. It'll tell you you're not enough, not good enough, too broken to matter. And you can believe it, or you can prove it wrong. Your choice. Which did you choose? Becca asked, though she already knew the answer. Eliza smiled, looking at the life she'd built, the family surrounding her, the community that had grown from one rejected woman and one lonely rancher choosing to try. I chose to prove them wrong, she said. Every single day I chose to prove them wrong. And it made all the difference. That was the truth of Eliza Ward's life. Not that she was chosen, but that she chose. Not that she was saved, but that she saved herself. And in doing so, saved others too. She'd started as the unwanted bride, the last woman standing. She'd ended as the woman everyone needed, the one no one could live without. And the beauty of it, The real, honest beauty was that she'd done it by being exactly who she was, flawed and imperfect, but standing, always standing. That was enough. It would always be enough.